We're going to talk about two things today. We have two topics today. And the first topic we'll cover today. And if you have any questions, you can ask me about. The other topic is going to be ongoing for possibly the next 2-3 weeks, maybe. I don't know. The first topic is about portfolios. One of the other assignments that you have this semester is to create a portfolio. Well, one of the other assignments you have this semester is to create a portfolio. And you're going to turn it in two parts. You're going to turn it in partway through the semester, in a couple weeks, I think. And then you're going to turn it in at the end of the semester. And the portfolio that you turn in a couple weeks is going to have all our labs up to this point. And then the final portfolio that you turn in at the end of the semester will have all your labs. So what is a portfolio? A portfolio, in the simplest sense, is a collection of your work. So people in a lot of fields have portfolios. Photographers have portfolios. Models have portfolios. Web developers have portfolios. And what they simply are is a collection of your work, usually published for a certain reason, or usually created, I should say, for a certain reason. And that varies depending on the situation. Usually, in a professional context, is to gain employment. All right. In other words, a photographer is going to have sample of their work available so that you as a potential customer could look and see and say, yeah, that's the person I want to photograph my event. Or a model, if you need a model for something, you would look through the portfolios and see which model was the right fit for your particular project. Same thing for web development. You would look to see what web developer do you think impresses you with their skills that you would want to hire them. Now, within a classroom, portfolios can serve another purpose too. And that is to allow you to go back and sort of reflect upon what you've done so far this semester. I don't know, I imagine some of you have had some HTML experience before, and maybe some of you have not had HTML experience before. But this gives you a chance just to look and see week by week what you did, what improvements you made, and maybe think about if you were doing this today, what would you do differently on the different lab projects. So portfolio consists of, usually a home page, some text about you, and then samples of their work. And let's review a couple of them. The first one we're going to review is this one. And make sure your sound is on. Ooh, little button, little animation there. Hear the door creaking. Use your arrow keys to move around. Okay, I'm going to just be doing this the rest of the class because this is fun. I drive better than this in real life, honest. It's disorienting because you're driving towards you, and I'm usually thinking of the controls as going away from you. Picture that way. Okay. This is an example of a project that they worked on. And can we view it? Okay. I'll open here. And we can view an example of it. This is part of their portfolio is a tutorial that they created. Now, interestingly enough, although his portfolio is visually appealing, it was maddening for me trying to figure out what to do and trying to drive to the right place to see his projects. So it looked great, but I don't know if I liked his portfolio just because it was awkward to work your way around. I didn't know what I had to do to open the site and first, and it was just confusing. But anyhow, The point I wanted to bring up by showing this one is that sometimes portfolios can be very complex, but they don't have to be complex. I'll give up on this one. Sometimes portfolios can be complex, but they don't have to be complex. Here's another example of a portfolio that talks about this web developer, Brittany Chang, lead engineer at Upstatement, build pixel perfect, engaging and accessible websites. And they have a little information about the designer, essentially a syllabus, or not a syllabus, a resume. There's an about section, experience section, a project section of stuff that they've worked on. And again, just to throw my editorial opinion in, although the other one was much more visually appealing, I would consider this a better portfolio because it's more straightforward and gets the message across. If I was going to hire a web developer, I would initially be attracted to the one with the little car driving around, but I would soon stop being interested in it just because it was awkward to work around. All right, so you're going to do something like this. You don't have to create a resume, but there should be a little section about you. All right, so just explain, who you are, give some information about you, maybe what your major is, maybe if you've done HTML previously, or if this is your first experience in HTML, maybe what your future plans are. You don't have to go in great detail. This would be absolutely fine. 3 paragraphs. All right, 3 short paragraphs about you would be fine. You don't have to create a resume if you don't want to, but you should have a project section. And that project section will contain links to all of your assignments. All right. Along with a little paragraph talking about them, like they do here. She created a page to show you how to create a Spotify connected app. And she explains it here. Video course that teaches how to build a web app with the Spotify web API. Topics uncovered include the principles of REST APIs, user authorization flows, Node, Express, React, styled components, and more. She has a few words about each project. Then there's a link to a full project archive that you can see if you want to. Very simple, well organized. All right. Now, let's look at the nuts and bolts of how you're going to create this. All right. Because by the time you create the portfolio, you're going to have 6 labs completed. If you put everything in the same folder, you'd have some trouble, right? Because you might have 2 pages named index.html. What do you do then? You can only have 1 page in your folder named index.html. Well, if you copy them all into that folder, one of them is going to overwrite the other one. All right. So what we're going to do is to divide things into their own folders. Now, thus far in this course, I talked about when you create a file or a website for an assignment, to put everything in a single folder. All right. Zip up the folder and turn that in. And this is something, again, I want to remind you. Everything means the images. It means the CSS file. And the path that you're going to use should not be something like C:/user/mic/document/images, something like that. We'll see how to refer to files if they're in a different folder. So here's the example I created. All right. Notice what I have. I have my index, my main page, and I have the main style sheet. And then I have links to the different labs. Now, I'm not actually turning this in for a grade, so I didn't do all 6 labs. I did the first 2, but you'll do all 6 of them. So if we look at it, it looks like this. Simple. Paragraph about me. Now, I think I've talked about Greek text before. If I haven't, this will be the first time. If I have, this as a reminder that sometimes when you're designing a page, you use sort of like filler text that's called Greek text. And in fact, you can Google Greek text and you can generate actually some for you. So if I wanted 5 paragraphs of Greek text, and it's not actually Greek text, it looks more like Latin, but you can generate 5 paragraphs and then you could copy and paste that into your page. That way, if you don't have, let's say if you're designing something and you don't have an article finished, you can go and you can generate the Greek text and have that fill in the space just so that you can see how it's going to look out. Now, it's okay for me to use that in examples because I'm not giving myself a grade. All right. You, however, when you turn something in, there's only one place where Greek text is permitted, and that is on the design prototype for your project. You can use Greek text there. Any other assignment that you turn in, the final project, the portfolio, any of the labs, you will get deducted if you use Greek text. You need actual text on the web page. So I have this, and then I have some examples of what I created. I got a little lazy. I only did a sentence for paragraph for lab 1, and I did nothing for lab 2. You should have a few sentences about each of the labs. All right. And when you click on it, you go to that lab. And each lab should have a link that you can click on and go back to the portfolio. So lab 2 has the same thing, portfolio home. My suggestion would be to put the portfolio home like it's the first thing on the page, the link back to it. And then you have a footer. Now, we're going to look over a couple things with this. We're going to look over the CSS, and we're going to look at how the links are created when things are in different folders. So the CSS. Let's actually look at the HTML along with the CSS. All right. I actually don't have a nav, which I could have made this a nav. The example section, I could have made that a nav, but I didn't. Doesn't matter to me. You can make it a section, you can make it a nav. I then have in here sort of the same thing for all 3 sections, the header, the section, and the footer. I've given a background color of the body of white. So if we look at the page, the background of the page is white. For each section, I've identified a background color, a border width, a border color, a border style, padding, margin, and width. And I did that for each of the 3 sections. Now each section by section, I shouldn't use that word, each part of this web page, the header, the section, and the footer, you can think of as being a box. These are, in technical terms, these are block tags. A block tag always starts on a new line. So if I have my header and then I have my footer, there'll be a blank line between the header and the footer. Or if I have a header and a section, there'll be a blank line between them. So it always starts on a new line. Links are inline tags, which means that if I could put things right alongside a link if I want to. If I put some text here, for example. All right, so we can think of these as boxes. Let's see what we're styling about the box. And I'm going to go in sort of just an arbitrary order. First thing I do is I specify the width of this. And I give 60%. That's 60% of the available space. Now the available space in this case is the width of the window that's open. So notice as I make this smaller, that gets to be smaller. If I have a big monitor, it'll be wider. If I'm looking on a mobile device, it will be narrower. And that's kind of good, right? You don't want a horizontal scroll on a phone. Vertical scrolling is okay. People do that all the time. But horizontal scrolling is kind of bad on a phone. So you don't want to do that. And there would be no horizontal scrolling, even if this was viewed on a small phone. So that's the width. The margin is 0 pixel auto. Now remember, and I think we touched on this earlier in the semester, but things that are related to the box, like margin, like border, like padding, go in 4 directions: top, right, bottom, left. And I can specify an attribute for all of them. If I only give one number. So I could say, for example, on a header, margin 0px. That would mean the top margin, the right margin, top margin, the right margin, the bottom margin, and the left margin would all be 0. And that's what we have here. However, I specified 2 of them. I said 0 and auto. That means the top margin is 0. The right margin is auto. The bottom margin is 0, and the left margin is auto. Those auto margins effectively center the stuff on the page. So this is 60% of the page, and it's centered. So 60% of the page, and it's centered. All right. Padding is 15 pixels. The easiest thing to do if you're not sure, if you're looking at one of my examples and you're not sure what something does, is change it. Padding is the space between the edge of the box and where the text starts. And again, we have 4 numbers for these. But I just give everything 15 pixels. If I gave everything 0 pixels, everything is crammed right up against the end. If I make it 15 pixels, then everything is 15% from the edge of the box. Now, I lied a little bit a minute ago. I said that box was 60% of the page. It's actually 60% plus some stuff. The border, the margin, and the padding all get added onto it. So actually, since there's padding on the right and padding on the left, this would be 60% of the width of the page plus 30 pixels for would be the total width of this page. The width is the width of the content area. All right, next thing we have is border. And with border, we have three attributes. We have the width of the border, the color of the border, and the style of the border. Border width is 1 pixel. Color is black. Style is solid. That gives us this border. If we change those and made them different, make it red, we could make the pixel 5 pixels. We could make it dotted. One nice thing about using Visual Studio Code is it gives you a little help on what the possibilities are. Solid is 1, dotted or dashed is another. If we want to do that. Now this actually also adds to the width of it. It adds 5 pixels on the right and 5 pixels on the left. Now we can specify those individually, like we've done here. We can actually specify a value for each. So I could specify black and red. And what that's going to do is it's going to make the top black, the right red, the bottom black, and the left red. You can actually, through the combination of these, make pretty much any kind of border design you want. You could even make it underline, and we'll show you how to do that in a second here. All right. I can put all those properties in one thing and say border 1 pixel black and solid. The browser is smarter enough to know that 1 pixel means the width, black means the color, and solid means the type of border. I could also say border bottom and specify all the attributes for the bottom, or I could say border bottom type and give the solid, border bottom width and give the size, and so on. So if you have a lot of flexibility with this. If I say border bottom, then notice that got underlined. The section got underlined. So therefore, where I say, if you've turned in a homework assignment and you use an HR tag, it probably said don't use HR tags or avoid using them. It's better to use CSS. This is what you could do in CSS, is you could put a border on the element and only specify the bottom border for it. So this whole thing is called the box model. The way how we have boxes on the page, and we can specify margin, padding, and border. Now let's let's get on to the second part of this, how to get things if they're in a different directory. Okay. So here's the home page. Here's our link to Lab 1. Let's look out in File Explorer and see how it's organized. Here we're in the Portfolio with Style folder, and Lab 1 is in here. Our file name for Lab 1 is FAQ.html. So if I were to put FAQ.html here, it's not going to work. Why is it not going to work? Because that file is not in the same folder. You can specify just the file name if that file is in the same folder as the web page you're coming from. However, in this case, it's in the Lab 1 folder. So to access a file in the Lab 1 folder from a file in this folder, you need to give the what's called the relative path. In other words, how do you get there from here? From the index.html, you have to go down, first of all, to the Lab 1 folder, and then the file that you want is faq.html. So I have lab1/faq.html. And that will work. Now you'd use the same kind of strategy if you put the CSS file in a different folder. Sometimes you have a folder for styles, and then you would say styles/main.css or whatever your file is called. You could do it with images and do images/ and the name of the file, the image file. But if you're going down a directory, you always put the directory name, a slash, and then the name of the file. Now, how do we get from here back up to the portfolio home? That's a little bit different because we're going up the directory structure. In this case, I say .. and the name of the file. .. means go to the parent directory. Go to the directory that this file is in. So this file is in Lab 1. What is the parent of that directory? What directory is that in? It's in Portfolio with Style. How do I get to that? I go up one level. You could actually go up multiple levels if it was nested several folders deep. But usually for our purposes, going up one level is enough. So I go from here, I go up a directory, and the file that I want is index.html. So if you're going down a directory, you always put the name of the folder and then the name of the file. Because from any given directory, there can be many sort of children directories. There can be many folders contained within the main directory. But from any given subdirectory, there's only one directory that's the parent. So that's why we can get away with just doing .. instead of having to give the name of the folder that's in. And no matter what, we definitely will not have C:/files/whatever. So this allows us to address the stuff that are in different folders. And that's the best way to do it. So how are you going to complete this portfolio assignment? It's actually pretty simple. You're going to create a directory for your portfolio. You're going to copy all your labs that you've turned in, 1 through 6. And if you if you didn't keep a copy, which you should have, but if you didn't keep a copy, you can download them from Canvas. You'll put each of the lab folders in your portfolio directory. You'll create a portfolio h.html page, write a little about yourself, give links to each of your labs, write a little bit about each lab, and then go in and change each of your labs to have a link, probably on the top of the page, to go back to the portfolio home. Right? So that's what you need to do with that. Any questions about the portfolio? Now, if you're doing a portfolio, if you're going to put this online, for example, and market yourself, you probably would not literally put every one of your projects online. All right. You'd probably pick the several of them that you think are the best and put those on a full, on your project. So, the first lab is not going to get you any jobs if people see that, and know that you were able to create paragraphs and headings and all that. But maybe your project is something worth sharing for people. So you could do that. I encourage you to give it a shot. It actually doesn't cost much to get to register a URL, register a domain, and get a internet service provider, and or a web hosting company. And actually make your portfolio live. All right. So that's topic one. If you have any questions about that, if there's something you didn't understand, please don't hesitate to ask. The next thing that we're going to go over, and we're going to start it today, but we'll definitely go over next week and maybe the week after, are prototypes. All right, I have actually 6 prototypes in here, and I think I have a couple more in a different file. And what I did in this example is I took a simple HTML page, I think for a travel site. I pretended like my project was a travel site, and I created a prototype. Now, if you notice here, I have 3 pages: the index, Iceland, and Hawaii. I also have something called template.html. All right. Template.html is where you start developing the template for a page. So I'm going to open this up, and this is what my page, I want the pages to look like. This, for example, would correspond to my wireframe. All right. So I get everything on this page the way I want it to be. And we'll spend a lot of time going over the style because there's a lot of stuff going on in these files. But I would get my template the way I would want it to be, and then I would clone the template because I want all my pages to have the same basic structure and the same basic appearance. So if you have 2 wireframes, you'd create 2 templates and then clone it. So I would copy template for Brazil and have a Brazil.html page that was a copy of the template. I've already done that with index, Iceland, and Hawaii. And then what you do is you go into the specific page and make it add the stuff that's only on that page. So your template contains the common stuff that's on all pages. The specific page contains just that specific page. So let's look at the home page. All right. Now let's see how much time we have left. We have about 10, 15 minutes. Good. We can get a start on this. I don't know if we'll cover it completely, but we'll will, cover it. So I have the first two of these. I have the first two of these links created. So I have a Hawaii page and an Iceland page. Now again, this is for the prototype. So therefore it's acceptable for me to have just a little bit. I could do more than this. All right. When you create a prototype, the idea is you want to give the person that you're showing the prototype to an idea of what the completed website is going to look like. Now, they don't necessarily need to know all the real pictures that are going to be on it or all the text, exactly what it is, but they want to get a sense of what the pages look like and how the navigation works so that they understand. So that they can look at it and say, well, maybe we need, we don't need one for Brazil and instead we need Canada, for example. So in a prototype, it's not important to have the exact text that's going to be on the page. You can use Greek text. Now, when you turn it in as a finished product, you need to have completed text. So let's look at the home page. Index.html. By the way, index.html is a great name for a home page. The way index.html looks should be real no surprise to you. Only thing a little different is we have this extra style sheet to use one of the Google fonts. But I have a link to my style sheet. I have a header. I have a nav. I have a section. And I have a footer. So these should look very familiar to you because that's sort of the basic structure that we've set up for our pages so far. Let's look at the CSS. And the CSS, let's start by looking at the body. Let's say the body image is URL background tile.png. I don't specify anything, therefore this is going to tile. The image itself is not big. Only takes up that much space, but it's tiled. And the way, what tiling means, it means it's interlocked in a way where it looks like a seamless, bigger design. I don't know why I closed Visual Studio Code. Got to record. Now this particular one doesn't use any Google fonts, I don't think. This is for a future one that we're going to use Google fonts on. The font I defined is Helvetica, Arial, and sans serif. Remember, when you define fonts, you define multiple fonts in case a particular browser doesn't have one of those fonts loaded. So in this case, it's going to look for Helvetica first. If the browser has Helvetica, it will use that. We'll then look for Arial if it doesn't have Helvetica, and if it has it, it will use that. Finally, it will use the browser's default sans serif font. And it's going to be used for everything on the page except for the H1. Let's see, H1, we override the body. by saying the font family is Garamond or serif font. So it looks first for Garamond, then if that's not found, it uses the default serif font. Everything else doesn't have font family. Oh, actually, this is where we use the Google font. Down here, the section. We use the Google font of Poppins. So everything except the H1 and text of the section uses the default fonts for the page. Those two use something else. All right, our main parts of the page, we've defined something very similar to what we've had in the portfolio example. We give a width. In this case, I say the width is 600 pixels. In that case, the width stays constant no matter what we do to the size of the window. It's actually better to use percentages than absolute numbers like that. But I did want to show you that you can use absolute numbers. I specified the margin, the 0 and auto, padding of 15. Background color is white. Text align is center. So this H1 is centered within the header. The border is solid, and the border radius is 55 px. That's what gives it a very big curve. If I make this smaller, like 5 px, it's rounded still if you look very close, but it's a smaller round. If I make this big, actually it doesn't really matter much at that big. It's already pretty rounded. And I do the same for all my major elements, my nav, my section, and my footer. The only difference being is the section I give a font family of Poppins, which is the font family that I have declared from Google Fonts. How do we use a Google Fonts on our particular page? Let's spend a minute looking at that before we finish. It shows you how to do it. Shows you copy and paste. You have a style sheet for the font family, the Google font family you want. And then you say font family equals that name. So family equals tangerine, font family tangerine. And where do you see the list of all those? Okay, there you go. I look for a font that I want. I don't know, it doesn't matter. But let's say I like this one. I click on that. I can make it bigger or smaller to see what it's going to look like at different size. Then I can click on Get Font. And I can use either download or get embedded code. Let's click on get embedded code. And this shows me the CSS that you need to put in there, along with how to use that font family name. Or you can download, in which case it will give you actually a file that you can use to incorporate that font into your word processing or other application. But for our case, when we're using them, we'd use the embed option. And that actually shows you what code you need to use it. All right, we'll continue with this example. Spend some time looking at it and see if you have any questions about the stuff that I do on this page. We're going to run through the list of several examples of these, and in each example, we're going to demonstrate something different with CSS. All right, are there any questions? If there's no questions, that's all I had. We'll either see you in lab or we'll see you next week.